Oh, wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. Today, we just up in the archives of Aboriginal knowledge, that's all. Today, we're going to go ahead and go over this scholarly series by a person named Schoolcraft. As it says here, information respecting the history, condition, and prospects of the Indian tribes of the United States, collected and prepared under the Bureau of Indian Affairs by Henry Schoolcraft. All right, LLD, member of the Royal Geographical Society, the London Royal Antiquarian Society, the Copenhagen Ethnological Society, Paris, etc., etc. All right, published by authority of Congress, it says here. And again, this is part of the series, which is known as the Archives of Aboriginal Knowledge, containing all the original papers laid before Congress, respecting the history, antiquities, language, ethnology, pictography, rites, superstitions, and mythology of the Indian tribes of the United States by Henry Schoolcraft, LLD. All right, in 6 volumes. We're in volume 1. All right, 6 volumes of this. We're only in volume 1. We have read parts of these volumes in different videos, in my older videos, but we're gonna try to, skim through it, get some of the quotes and of the primary sources in Schoolcraft and investigation and all that, and what he collected here, which is a lot of good drop. A lot of stuff proving what we've already researched about America being the true old world and things like that, and how old the ancient Americans are. And just some general, as it says here, general knowledge or general history according to their investigation here, right, in the Archives of Aboriginal Knowledge. All right, so we're just going to get some quotes here and there from different chapters, see what we can pull out of each chapter, all right? And we go into chapter 1 right away. It's called General History. And these are ancient things. 1 Chronicles 4:22. How interesting that they start out their scholarly work, first chapter, with a quote from the Bible, right? And we go into part A, some drop here. It says a history, national, and tribal. It says here, we perceive in them, if examined by the light of truth, as revealed alike by divine and profane records, a marked variety of the human race, possessing traits of a decidedly Oriental character. Oriental character? So when we say this is the true India superior, the true old world, where is the true East? Where is the true West? Are we flipping the maps? This is ancient people who have been lost to all history, ancient and modern. We have been lost to all history, ancient and modern, But look what it says here of their precise origin, and the era and manner of their migration to this continent, we know nothing with certainty, which is not inferential. Again, we know nothing. So you can't say, oh, these are Oriental. What do you mean by Oriental if you know nothing? Get it? And shout out to 432 The Drop Radio, Comp Drop, good brother. If they can't tell you who you are, how can they tell you who you're not, right? And we're saying, no, this is the true old world, the oldest people over here. You know what I'm saying? They are evidently ancient in their occupancy of the continent. They are ancient in this continent. There are probably ruins here which date within 500 years of the foundation of Babylon. There's probably, maybe they're trying to give some drop, but they're not trying to give it all out. This is the true old world. Again, we have ancient ruins, older than a lot of the stuff over there. The oldest pyramids in the world are from Caral Supe, Peru. You know, older than what they're saying Babylon. Continue a little further down. Says, in this unvarying and indomitable individuality, they're talking about the American Indians, and in their fixity of opinion and general idiosyncrasy, they certainly remind the reader of Oriental races, of the Shemitic family of man, of the Shemitic Shem, descendants of Shem, so-called Hebrews, Eber, Abraham, Shem, Shemitic family of man. You see? It says here, origin. Where such a race can be supposed to have had their origin, history may vainly inquire. They don't know. It probably broke off from one of the primary stocks of the human race before history had dipped her pen in ink or lifted her grave on stone. Our Indian stock seem to be still more ancient. Their languages, their peculiar idiosyncrasy, all that is peculiar about them, denote this. They're ancient. Considered in every point of view, the Indian race appears to be of a very old stock. Again, we're just talking about the true old world. Nothing that we have in the shape of books is ancient enough to recall the period of his origin, but the sacred oracles, okay? You see what he's telling you? It's older than what books can record, the people of the America. He continues saying, if we appeal to these, a probable prototype may be recognized in that branch of the race which may be called Almogic. You see that? We're going to go to that. A branch of the Eberites, from the tribes of Eber, the people of Eber who separated from building the Tower of Babel. So his language and his people, his family did not get their language confused, keeping the original mother tongue, which eventually was called Hebrew, out of his name Eber, but it doesn't mean it was called Hebrew before him. It's what Adam was speaking, he was still speaking. You understand? So-called Adam, or the first man. It says, to whom indeed the revelation was not made, but who, as co-inhabitants for many ages of the same country, may be supposed to have been more or less acquainted with the fact of such revelation. You hear what they're saying in this book, right? The scholarly book. It might be a branch of the Eberites, huh? Hebrewites, Hebrewites, Israelites, Hebrewites. Almogic, footnote number 1. Down here it says, footnote number 1, from Almodad. What does that mean? The son of Joktan. You guys hear that? They must be an Almogic tribe from Almodad, the progenitor of the Almogic people, which is a son of Joktan. Joktan or Yucatan, Joktan. Yeah, a son of Eber. A son of Eber. They may be called an Almogic branch of the Eberites. They believe in a supreme transcendental power of goodness, or great merciful spirit, by whom the earth, the animals, and man were created. Just talking about the Most High, Hawa, also in a great antagonistical power, who can disturb the benevolent purposes of the other power. This person they call the great evil spirit. The belief in this duality of gods is universal. They relate generally that there was a deluge at the ancient epic which covered the earth and drowned mankind, except for a limited number. They regard the earth as their cosmogonic mother, Wa, the wisdom mama, and declare their origin to have been in caves or in some other manner within its depths underground, huh? Continuing ahead, the Algonquin Indians indeed say, in accordance with geological theory, that the animals at first had the rule on earth and that man came in as a later creation. One of the chief features of this epic of monstrosities in each leading family of American tribes is the tradition of some great hero, giant killer, or wise benefactor, whose name is exalted as a god and to whose strength, wisdom, or sagacity they attribute deliverance. Such is Quetzalcoatl among the Toltecs and Aztecs, Ata Hen Sik, Ata Tarjo, and Tarin Yawagan among the Iroquois and Mikabo, or the Great Hare, popularly called Manabozo among the Algonquins. Little more ahead, I thought this was interesting, just so general info for people to understand the difference between when they're saying Mexica people, Toltec, and so-called Aztec. A lot of people give Aztec a lot more years than they had in the territory of Mexico or rulership. It says here by the Codex de Julianus and the Codex Vaticanus, which have been made accessible by the publication of Lord Kingsborough, right? That's from Antiquities of Mexico. We're going to get that book soon again. It is perceived that there was no Aztec ruler at all by the name of Quetzalcoatl. All right, the Aztecs never really had a ruler called Quetzalcoatl because they didn't start till 1399. Listen, we're going to see that. During the term of their supremacy, Quetzalcoatl was a Toltec, Tolteca Maya, ancient Quetzalcoatl was a Toltec, real person. Moctezuma, speaking of the Lord of the Seven Caves, probably referred to an earlier period of their general history. So Moctezuma and them were saying, yeah, that's our God. But they borrowed that from the Toltecs, right? So-called Toltecs, or the Maya people related to Olmecs too. There can be no pretense set up, indeed, that the Aztecs were aboriginals. They found a strong monarchy under the Toltecs. There can be no pretense set up, indeed, that they're an aboriginal. That's literally what it means right here. They're not aboriginal because they found a strong monarchy when they got there under the Toltecs, to whom they became tributary. And these latter acknowledged the rule of the Olmecs before them, which Ferdinand de Alva traces to the 3rd century. All three tribes spoke kindred dialects. Kindred dialects. It was not, in fact, till AD 1399 when the Aztecs, so-called Aztecs, this is when they really got power or got there, had been 183 years, by their own account, in the valley of Anahuac, that they resolved to set up for themselves and elected Ocampechtli emperor. That's when they became the empire, right? The Aztecs in 1399. Their whole era of rule prior to the final conquest by Cortez in 1520 had been but 121 years. That's all. You guys see? 120 years. That's all. That's as long as the Aztecs ruled. That's it. They're not the ancient people of Mexico. So that's what I'm saying. When people attribute a lot of things that were a lot older than so-called Aztecs, this is what I mean. This story is told by their picture writings, which have been elaborately examined by the late Honorable Albert Gallatin in the first volume of the Transactions of the American Ethnological Society. We continue to chapter 2. Says here the mental type of the Indian race. Says here the North American tribes of our latitudes appear to have felt that the existence of evil in the world was incompatible with that universal benevolence and goodness which they ascribe to the merciful Great Spirit. Iroquois theology meets this question. They account for it by supposing at the creation, the birth of two antagonistical powers of miraculous energy, but subordinate to the Great Spirit, one of whom is perpetually employed to restore the discords and maladaptations and the visible creation of the other. The idea of the allegory of the egg of Ormuzd has been disclosed in the progress of Western settlements by the discovery of an earthwork situated on the summit of a hill in Adams County, Ohio. Talking about the Serpent Mound here. This hill is 150 feet above the surface of Brush Creek. It represents the coil of a serpent 700 feet long, but it is thought would reach, if deprived of its curves, 1,000 feet. The jaws of the serpent are represented as widely distant, as if in the act of swallowing. In the interstice is an oval or egg-shaped mound. The Oriental notion thus depicted is too peculiar to render it probable that it originated here. So because what they assume is an old world tradition or symbol, like the snake swallowing the egg, or the act of conception of the sperm and the and the egg and the woman, the act of conception. They think that's an ancient thing. They said this must not have originated here. But what are you finding? Where are you finding that? In Ohio, right? Which I mean, it didn't originate there. So here, thus far, the beliefs of the more northerly of our tribes appear to be of a Chaldee Persic character. Chaldea, Irish, the true old world. It says here, it is a species of idolatry laid to the charge of the Israelites. They're going to call this, idolatry, dash to hijack. That while they were in the wilderness, they ate the sacrifices of the dead. All right, that's from Psalms. There is hardly a form of Eastern idolatry herein alluded to, into which the Israelites had not at one time or another fallen. But the most common, widespread, and often occurring rite was that of burning incense on high places to imaginary beings. That was to the Most High they were doing that. What do they mean? You see how they're talking about them as idolaters? So burning incense, the Israelites, or to devils, they're saying, under the delusive idea of their being gods. The very trait which is so striking in all our Indian tribes, just like the Indians, practicing things the Israelites did, huh? Just like all our Indian tribes. Now check this out, guys. Moving on, it says, on the discovery of the race, as represented by the Caribs, in reference to the Caribs, right, of the West Indies, in 1492, Columbus was so struck with the general resemblance of their physiological traits to those of East Indians or Hindustanis, that he at once called them Indianos. Really? Now that wouldn't make sense if we picture, East Indians or Hindustanis in general of today. But what Hindus exactly? Real quick, just for some context maybe. So real quick, right? Columbus said they look like the Hindus, huh? The Caribs, right? I'm just going to show you some example of some old pictures of Hindu people or from India, the Republic of India, right? Hindustan. And this is from like the late 1800s, mostly. Okay, so that's her. You got this young lady right here. Look at that. You see? So-called black, right? Or no? So they look like the Hindus, huh? There's another girl from India. You see? You see? So the Caribs look like the Hindus, huh? So what type of Hindus, right? This is another Indian Hindu girl. All right. Don't that look like a lot of people you might know here in the United States, so-called black? All right, this is what I'm saying. We got to stop going by just looks and stereotypes of what you think people look or are. All right, you see, so this is what I'm saying. Columbus saying they look like black Caribs, huh? Look at this Hindu girl right here. Look at that. Don't she look like a lot of people from the States or even the Americas and the islands, Caribbean, whatever? This man, okay. And we got this man, a Sholaga man, 1909 India. All right. The Caribs, huh? The Caribs, Nayar women from India, Nayar. Okay. So the Caribs look like the Hindus, according to Columbus, right? East Indian woman in Trinidad, right? Look at that. You see? So the Caribs look like the Hindus, according to Columbus, right? According to Columbus, right? Look at that. See how they look different too? But a lot of these people would be considered so-called black if you didn't know they were from India, walking around with regular clothes. All right, you see? East Indian woman in Martinique. This is from 1899. You see that? I just want you guys to see. A Hindu woman right here. You see? Hindu woman. Yeah, these are the ones you don't know about. These are Hindu older man and a boy in Suriname. All right. As you guys can see, so-called black. Hindu woman right here. You got different looks, you see? So the Columbus, you know, that was his comparison. That's what he had to reference, you know. He said they look like Hindus or a little bit, you know. Look at her. A basket seller. This is in the Caribbean, a Hindu. And got her as well. You see? All right, so just real quick, just for reference, you guys can see Columbus. This is East Indian woman in Suriname. So the Caribs, right? The Caribs look in general. So these people are dark complexion, right? I'm talking about the original Hindustan people, right? You know how they had their caste systems. They don't want you to know about these darker skinned East Indian people. You see that? Don't you look like a lot of people here from the States? I would say so. You know, you may not want to agree. All right, Hindu woman right here. Okay. Again, these are old pictures. East Indian family in America. East Indian family in America. Look. So-called black. All right, this is from my Black Asian videos. If you haven't checked those out, check it out. East Indian woman in Martinique. All right. Got a child here, just showing her. This is a more modern person, you know. And then let's see what else I got. Okay, that's it. So I just wanted you guys to show, well, compare what maybe Columbus is kind of referring to, right? East Indian, huh? Hindu, the Caribs. Let's go back. So on the discovery of the race as represented by the Caribs of the West Indies in 1492, Columbus was so struck with the general resemblance of their physiological traits to those of the East Indians or Hindustanis that he at once called them Indianos. That's why, remember, he didn't know. I mean, he already knew this was the true old world. He was never lost. So there's a lot of different things, but, you know, reasons why he was calling them Indians. In Spanish, that means people of God, in Dios. We continue on to chapter 3 of this book. It says here, Antiquities. Evidences of a fixed cultivation at an antique period. All right, agriculture originated in the Americas. So right below this, it tells us that the prairie fields here, what we know as the prairie fields of the West, may be assigned as falling under the inference of having been abandoned fields, may constitute a subject of general speculation. They might have been agricultural fields, these prairie fields now that they call them in the US. It appears to be clear that the great area of the prairies proper is independent of that cause. Fire is the evident cause of the denudation of trees and shrubs in a large part of the area between the Rocky and the Allegheny Mountains. Water comes in for a share of the denudation in valleys and moist prairies, which may be supposed to be the result of a more recent emergence from its former influence. But there is a third and limited class of prairies or openings in the forest regions which may well be examined with a view to this question. Portions of the western valleys are clearly referable to this class. We submit evidences of such former cultivation in a paper on the antique garden beds. All right, antique garden beds, we're talking about the start of civilization, we're talking about agriculture, as they have been called in Indiana, antique garden beds, and Michigan, and some remarks on the origin and extent of the cultivation of the same maize as drawn from the Indian traditions. So here they got some images of some ancient garden beds, as they were just talking about, in the valley of the river St. Joseph. Okay, this is how they're drawing these ancient garden beds. Okay, and then they got another one right here. It says ancient garden beds in Grand River Valley, Michigan. As you guys can see, these are real ancient garden beds. This is what I was saying. They're not finding all this and over there in Mesopotamia and that desert over there. They're not finding fossilized foods, you know, vegetables, fruits, and ancient farming sites like they're finding here in the Americas, right? We're talking about real ancient garden beds. So when it comes to these garden beds, a little further ahead, it says that they extend so far as observed over the level and fertile prairie lands for about 150 miles, guys. Come on now. Show me that in Mesopotamia over there in so-called Iraq. Ranging from the source of the Wabash and of the west branch of the Miami of the Lakes to the valleys of the St. Joseph's, the Kalamazoo, and the Grand River of Michigan. They are of various sizes, covering generally from 20 to 100 acres. Ancient garden beds, guys. Some of them are reported to embrace even 300 acres. As a general fact, they exist in the richest soil, as it is found in the prairies and bur oak plains, all right, fertile black soil. We're talking about acres and acres and miles of ancient garden beds, not prairies. We call them prairies today. That's what they told us. They were ancient greenhouses, farms, you know, plantations. Imagine, must have been feeding massive amount of peoples. Must have been going far. Again, we're just talking about the prairie fields of the West or ancient garden beds. Do you guys know that? They don't tell people this, right? But this was confirmed by these scholars, right? This is what they're finding in the geology that they're studying. It's not just grasslands or prairies, guys. These were ancient garden beds, miles and miles and miles. And now today it's just like open fields, right? Grass. No wonder. No wonder there's no trees here, because the ancient people were growing stuff on these fields, on these lands. Look at, they're still using them. You see that? The prairie's flat out beautiful. Look at that, flat out beautiful. They're still growing some type of grass here, or cattle raising. One before it used to be garden beds, not just for cows, not just for grazing, not just prairies. All right. Here we talk about maize, right, and how it relates to a lot of the Southeast Indians being related to the ancient civilizations of Mexico. It says here the fact that the ancient Indian tribes of the Mississippi Valley brought the same maize with them is almost demonstrative proof that they proceeded from southern or intertropical latitudes. This grain was the element of Mexican civilization. They could not have lived in large masses or towns without it. Consequently, they could not, without such a fixed means of subsistence, have built the pyramids of Cholula and Chalco and other like works, like I've been trying to tell you and show you all these years. The beginning of civilization, architecture, and all that settling down was because of agriculture, especially because of maize, which we brought to the rest of the world, right? Erratic tribes who once knew the value of this grain would never relinquish it or forget its mode of culture, however far they migrated. Most of our tribes have invented myths to denote it as the gift of the deity to them, and as designed for their subsistence when game failed. The cultivation of large fields of corn would have enabled these tribes to band together and thus to have it in their power to erect the largest mounds in the West. It is remarkable indeed that the most numerous as well as the largest mounds are seated on fertile plains or in rich alluvial valleys, which are the best cornlands west of the Alleghenies, all right? Wherever there's fertile land and agriculture, you'll have high civilization. Says here the state of art and miscellaneous fabrics. Now, before we continue, is about to get into the Lake Superior mining, metallurgy. Just want to show you guys that's not something that was created in the other part of the world only. In fact, it might be originated here. It might be first done here, as it says here in the Encyclopedia of American Indian Contributions to the World. 15,000 years of inventions and innovations. We're going to get back into this book. This is something I showed years ago. There's a lot of people who've read from it, done a lot of videos on it, the whole encyclopedia, shout out to them. It's okay to always go back. Nobody's here competing or anything, right? But in regards to metallurgy, so it says here on page 171, metallurgy, about 5000 BC to 4000 BC, it says North American, Northeast, Arctic, and Northwest, South American, Andean, Mesoamerican cultures. The term metallurgy refers to the science of extracting metals from ore, purifying them, and making objects from them. The Paleo-Indians of the northern Great Lakes area were the first American Indians known to have worked with metal, doing so approximately 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, according to Susan Hazen Hammond, author of Timelines of Native American History. They are the first metal workers in the world. Again, they are the first metal workers in the world, okay? Metallurgy started here in the Americas, guys. So Paleo-Indian metal workers of the southern Great Lakes region extracted copper from rock formations in that area. The largest and most accessible copper deposits north of what is now Mexico. We're talking about 500,000 tons is missing. This is what created the Bronze Age, so-called Bronze Age, copper that was mined from the Great Lakes area. Talking about metallurgy, was first metal workers were here in the Americas, in the world, all right? But now we're going to go back to the book. All right, we're going to talk about, it says here that this incipient state of a commercial element and the first steps of a kind of centralism in government acknowledged by this ancient people is shown by the remains of antique mining ruins such as those on Lake Superior, where the supplies of native copper were got. Also in the area of Indiana, where there appears to have been some attempts of metallurgy. I remember that was started here. Metallurgy, the oldest metal workers in the world, perhaps post-Columbian, and the antique traces of the same species of labor existed in the valley of the Unica, or White River, and of the Arkansas River, and perhaps the recent discoveries of antique gold mining in California. Accounts of these are appended. These attempts, which evince industry and skill beyond the wants of the mere hunter era, are probably of one epoch and admit of being grouped together. The whole of the western and northern antiquities of the highest class, embracing every monument of the kind north of the contemplated territory of Utah, and the country north of the Gila or Huila, to which the Toltec and Aztec civilization probably reached, may be viewed together by the antiquarian as forming the second type of American antique civilization. That this type was a transferred Americo-Shemitic. We can't make this up, guys. All right. Americo, Amarukan, Shemitic, Shem, people from Shem, Shemitic, Semitic, right? So you can't be anti, right? Shemitic. If you are Shemitic, right? Don't mislabel me, man. Americo, because I'm American, Shemitic. You understand? We got this a medical Shemitic character appears probable from renewed inquiries on the languages. And so we continue to the next section where it gets more in depth regarding the mining. It says here attempts in mining and metallurgy. It says here a state of incipient society appears to have existed among the people who erected fortifications and mounds in the Mississippi Valley, which led them to search for the native metals lying on the surface of the country, and in some instances buried within its strata or enclosed in veins. Such traces have been discovered at intervals over a very wide area. They extend from the mineral basin of Lake Superior in a southwestern direction towards the Gulf of Mexico. We're talking about mines, right? The most striking traits of ancient labor, talking about ancient times too, exist in the copper districts of Michigan. There are some vestiges of this kind in the Wabash Valley. They appear also in Missouri and Arkansas, where by the accumulation of soil, the works appear to be of a very ancient date. And if we are not misinformed, such indications reappear even in California. Native copper and native gold seem to have been the two chief objects of search. There's ancient copper mining in the basin of Lake Superior. The copper-bearing trap rock of Keweenaw Point, Lake Superior, ruins in a general course west of southwest, crossing the Keweenaw Lake, and afterwards passing about 10 miles distant from the open shores of the main lake. This range crosses the Ontonagon River about 10 to 12 miles from the mouth. At this point, and chiefly on location number 98, under the new grants are found extensive remains of pits, trenches, and caves. We're talking about mines here, wrought by the Aborigines in ancient times, of which the present Indians know nothing. These remains first appear in the Firesteel River, but in the following, the copper veins west of the Minnesota location, being number 98 above named, they are more fully developed. There are 3 and sometimes 4 of these ancient diggings on veins which are parallel to each other, extending 3 or 4 miles. These veins are about 900 feet above the lake. They are very regular, pursuing a course of about north 70 degrees east with a dip north 20 degrees west. An observer in September 1849 speaks of these remains which he had contemplated with great interest and curiosity in the following manner. It is along the edges of outcrop these veins that the ancient dug copper in great quantities. The ancients, right? Leaving as external evidences of their industry. Somewhat advanced people here. Large trenches now partly filled with rubbish, but well defined with a breadth of 10 to 15 feet and a variable depth of 5 to 20 feet. In one place, the inclined roof or upper wall work is supported by a natural pillar, which was left standing, being wrought around, but no marks of tools are visible. In another place, east of the recent works, is a cave where they have wrought along the vein a few feet without taking away the top or outside vein stone. The rubbish has been cleared away in one spot to the depth of 20 feet to the bottom of the trench, but the agent is of opinion that the deeper cuts than this will be hereafter found. When he first came to the conclusion about 18 months ago that the pits and trenches visible on the range were artificial, he caused one of them to be cleaned out. He found at about 18 feet in depth, measuring along the inclined face or floor of the vein, a mass of native copper, supported on a copwork of timber, principally the black oak of these mountains, but which the ancient miners had not been able to raise out of the pit. They even saw it in action. They found it like, oh, look, they just left it there. This is about, ancient people of America. And this is your so-called Bronze Age metal. Yeah. The great antiquity of these works is unequivocally proven by the size of timber now standing in the trenches. There must have been one generation of trees before the present, since the mines were abandoned. How long they were wrought can only be conjectured by the slowness with which they must have advanced in such great excavations, with the use of such rude instruments. That's what they think. The decayed trunks of full-grown trees lie in the trenches. I saw a pine over 3 feet in diameter that grew in a sinkhole on one of the veins, which had died and fallen down many years since. Above the mass raised by Mr. Knapp, there was a hemlock tree, the roots of which spread entirely over it, that had 290 annual rings of growth. These facts throw the date of the operations now being unveiled back beyond the landing of Columbus and consequently behind all modern operators of our race. All right. Ancient, ancient people. It's old. The skill which is shown in the knowledge of the true situation of veins, as well as the patience and perseverance necessary to do so much work, all prove that it was the performance of a people more civilized than our Aborigines. They're talking about the present Indians. They were in the time they wrote this book in 1860, right? It is reasonable to suppose that they were of the era of the mound builders of Ohio and the western states, who had many copper utensils. When we consider that the ancients who went through the tedious process of beating and mauling away the rock here found copper enough to compensate them for years, perhaps centuries of labor, the richness of these mines prosecuted with our means and knowledge can scarcely be exaggerated. I should have mentioned a copper chisel with a socket for a wooden handle, which has also been found about 5 inches long and 1¼ inch wide. All right. This is no exaggeration, guys. All right, 500 tons of copper. This is advanced people doing this, metallurgy. Now listen to this. It says, it is recorded that the Egyptians had the art of tempering copper so as to cut stone as well as wood, and that their great stone structures were wrought with tools of copper only. Listen, so all the way over there in the other part of the world, right, they're supposed to have been, they're using only copper when this is more abundant here. The purest copper in the world is copper right here, right? So listen, pay attention. I have been told by a person who has seen the Egyptian stonecutters' tools preserved in the British Museum at London, where in England, not in over there in Egypt, in England, that there are some very much like those found here. So you see, the ones they supposedly got from Egypt that they have stored in London actually look like the ones from here. They actually look so-called Egyptian, huh? I told you, they grab stuff from here, ancient America, and they bring it over to all their museums in the world. This case in London, they say, oh, we got this from over there in the desert in Eastern Africa right there, Western Asia right there, the Middle East and Egypt, when it's actually coming from the Americas. That's literally how I interpret this, all right? In my opinion, knowing that America, that ancient Egypt was in America to marry, all right? It says here, archaeological evidences that the continent had been visited by people having letters prior to the era of Columbus. So again, this is seen in reverse. Of course, we had inscriptions and letters and languages here in the true old world. That America was visited early in the 10th century by the adventurous Northmen from Greenland, revisited or just going back and forth in trade, coming back to its ancient motherland, and that its geography and people continued to be known to them. So late as the 12th century is admitted by all who have examined with attention the various documents which have been published during the last 12 years by the Royal Society of Northern Antiquaries at Copenhagen. There are evidences which every candid and right-minded historian will admit that the hardy and bold mariners of Scandinavia of that period crossed freely in vessels of small tonnage the various channels, gulfs, and seas of the northern Atlantic, and were familiar with the general islands and coasts stretching from Iceland to the northern parts of the continent. All right, we definitely don't disagree with that. We know that though in these Scandinavian ancient oral histories, they talk about their people coming from the Americas, and there might be some ancient connection there. If anybody was to cross the Atlantic, let's remember this, we've already read this first, it would have been American Indians, especially with the winds to our favor. The currents are actually stronger going that way. It's 4 times harder coming from that side. We got a whole breakdown of this in many different videos. Okay, so we definitely know that they would have come back, definitely, and keep trading, right? There's so many sources here, right? We just talked about the copper, right? Of course, these people coming to get some copper, so-called Bronze Age, right? So as it says here, we know when they're talking about their ancient mythical lands that they went to visit, as I was going to talk about here, Vinland is one of them. And I've been trying to tell you guys that the leading evidences serve to attest that Vinland was the present very marked seaboard area of New England. That's your mythological mainland. It was New England. It was the Americas. This is what I've been trying to tell you. The nautical facts have been carefully examined by Professor Rafinsky and Magnuson, and the historical data adapted to the configuration of coast, which has Cape Cod as its distinguishing trait. It even clearly describes Cape Cod. Come on now. All this seems to have been done with surprising accuracy and is illustrated by the present high state of the arts in Denmark and Germany, okay? There's no doubt. We know there was a lot of people here going back and forth way before Sarko, aka Columbus, right? So in the Narragansett Bay in Massachusetts, they have been found their rude pictographic characters and leaving what is clearly Icelandic to stand by itself. So two distinct and separate inscriptions thus appear, of which it is evident that the Icelandic is the most ancient. Again, they're seeing it in reverse. Moving on, it says the second paper is founded on the determination of M. Jomard of Paris of Libyan characters upon one of the tumuli or mounds of Western Virginia. To others, these characters have appeared to be Celtiberic. This is the opinion expressed by Professor Rafinsky of Copenhagen in the Memoirs of Northern Antiquarian Society. This opinion was concurred in by the American Ethnological Society. All right, Old World inscriptions found here throughout the Americas. And we continue with another one. It says ancient inscription on the Assonet or Dighton Rock. More importance has been attached to the Dighton Rock inscription. We've shown this in a lot of videos, guys, perhaps, than its value in our local antiquities merits. It is believed to be ascribed in part to the historical appeal made to it a few years ago by the Royal Society of Northern Antiquarians at Copenhagen on the occasion of their publishing the collection of old Icelandic sagas relating to early discoveries in America. So this last one is what they're talking about right here, Dighton Rock. It says U.S. National Register of Historic Places. You see, this is a real thing. Again, in Massachusetts. Originally located in the riverbed of the Taunton River, the rock is noted for its petroglyphs, right? We've got inscriptions, right? And here it is. Again, these are the inscriptions they're talking about, so-called Phoenician, Icelandic, Algonquin mixed in there and everything. So we've actually have videos on this, but I just wanted to show you what they were talking about, right? And back in the book, here is an illustration on some of the breakdown of the inscriptions or glyphs, petroglyphs on this rock, on Dighton Rock, as you guys can see. They like breaking it down here. Synopsis of the Assonet inscription. All right, that's the other name, Assonet. Okay. And continuing here, they talk about, it says here, notice of an inscription in antique characters found on a tabular stone or amulet in one of the western tumuli of probably the beginning of the 16th century. We're talking about West Virginia. We're talking about Grave Creek mounds and the Grave Creek tablet of stone that we've done, a lot of videos on it. We talked about it a lot. It contains Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions, so-called Phoenician, Libyan, Iberian, whatever they want to classify it in this book. But it says that the discovery of an inscription in a large tumulus near Wheeling in Western Virginia gives an importance to the opening of that mound, which it would not otherwise possess. The archaeological discovery was made by Mr. Abelard Tomlinson, the proprietor states, White Western pioneer, on the 16th of June, 1838. Here we get a description of what they found. It says Mr. Abelard M. Tomlinson states in the letter above referred to that he commenced opening the mound on the 19th of March, 1838, that he wrought at the excavation himself, and that he found the first or lower vault on the 4th of April, and the second or upper vault on the 16th of June of that year, that the osseous remains of 2 human skeletons in a state of decay were found in the first. I remember these were giants, like 7 or 8 footers, right? Of which one had 650 beads and a small joke-shaped ornament or implement with 2 perforations. The other was without any ornament whatever. That the upper vault contained the remains of but 1 skeleton and a great number of trinkets, the chief of which were 1,700 bone beads, 500 seashells, 150 pieces of mica, 5 copper wrist and armbands, and a small flat stone, all right, of which he furnishes a facsimile. So we're going to get the drawing, about 3/8 of an inch thick with an engraving. That's what they're talking about, the Grave Creek stone, all right? So right here to the left is the Grave Creek stone, as we have shown it before, as you guys can see, with the characters Paleo, Hebrew, Phoenician, so-called Phoenician. They found this in West Virginia inside a mound, guys. Okay, here in the true promised land, the true holy land, in the true old world. Okay, so these are just like examples of what they're using to tell you, you know, how it matches what is here. In regards to the inscriptions, right, it says the following characters are common, and it will be seen to the inscription at Dighton Rock and Grave Creek Mound, namely, and these are the ones they're showing you here, a still greater amount of resemblance to it appears in the stick book, characters of the ancient British Celtic. This is perceived in the characters, all right, which are common to both inscriptions, namely the Celtic and the Virginic, right? It's the same as the Celtic too. There would appear to be some grounds here for the Welsh tradition of Matic. We have thus 3 inscriptions which appear to have been made in the same mixed character or to have something in common. Elements of an alphabet are seen which were known to many nations of Western Europe. They find in this in the mounds, guys. This is older and were originally derivative from the banks of the Mediterranean before the introduction of the Roman alphabet. So that was supposedly from the Mediterranean before the Romans invaded, pre-Roman, all right? Again, it's all coming from the Americas. We brought it over there. You understand? True old world. All right, so we're gonna end it there for today. This episode, you know, this is part 1 of going over this series of books, these 6 volumes. We might go through all 6 of them, you know, if we read it like this, you know, get parts out of it, pull some babies out, some jewels, you know, some diamonds, some drop, and so we can put it together with all the other research we got, you know, from the horse's mouth themselves right here. Again, this was Archives of Aboriginal Knowledge, containing all the original papers laid before Congress, respecting the history, antiquities, language, ethnology, pictography, rites, superstitions, and mythology of the Indian tribes of the United States by Henry R. Schoolcraft, right? So what is Schoolcraft saying, huh? This was volume 1 again from 1860. All right, appreciate you guys coming on today, taking the time to hear me read these first, you know, some excerpts from these first 3 chapters. We'll continue going through the book, pulling out the babies, all right, and other parts coming up. All right, and again, we've gone over some of these volumes, you know, little extras here and there in older videos if you want to go ahead and catch up on the older videos, but we're going to read it, you know, here thoroughly like we did today, you know, some of these key points in the chapters, all right? But again, thanks for taking the time to be here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you see that they already knew this was the true world. This is all written in their archives, right? And their archives of the Aboriginals, the knowledge of the Aboriginals, of the indigenous people, right? Of the true old world. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.